The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee. Imagine looking directly into the eyes of a deeply worried priest and telling him this blatant, desperate lie. It's a moment of pure, high-stakes deception. You're entirely alone, you're totally unarmed, and you are literally running for your life. Today's explainer pulls us right into one of the most intense, pivotal encounters in ancient history. It's a highly dramatic sequence of events where a desperate fugitive sets off a chain reaction of survival, sacred duties, and silent, lurking threats.
Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to our explainer on survival, sanctity, and the shadow of Doeg. We're going to unpack an intense historical narrative about survival, sacred spaces, and what actually happens when our deepest contrasting loyalties are violently tested under pressure. We're going to see how three very different men, a desperate fugitive, a fearful priest, and a silent observer, navigate an impossibly tense room.
Section 1. A desperate fugitive arrives.
So, let's set the scene. David arrives at Nob, which is a sacred sanctuary city, completely alone and without weapons. Ahimelech, the priest there, comes out to meet him, and he is immediately terrified. And honestly, his fear is completely rational, right? Because David is a high-ranking military commander and the king's son-in-law. Showing up completely alone with no retinue, no guards, no weapons, it makes absolutely no sense. When Ahimelech asks why he's flying solo, David spins that fabricated cover story we heard at the beginning. He claims the king sent him on a highly classified secret mission requiring immense haste. He's actively covering his tracks, trying to explain away why he's so vulnerable, all while hiding the terrifying truth. He is actually fleeing from King Saul's wrath.
Section 2. Ahimelech's sacred choice. This brings us to a massive intersection of human need and holy law. David is starving. He urgently asks Ahimelech for 5 loaves of bread, or really just whatever's around. And suddenly, the priest is thrust into a profound dilemma, because there is no regular common bread on hand. Ahimelech tells him the only food available is the shewbread. Now this is hallowed bread. It's sacred food, ritually taken from before the Lord to be replaced with hot bread. This fact alone establishes the incredibly sacred nature of Ahimelech's domain. He is literally the guardian of the holy. But now, the messy, desperate reality of earthly politics and human starvation has crashed right into his sanctuary.
What follows is this highly unusual, incredibly tense negotiation. Ahimelech wants to help, but he has to balance his strict, sacred duty with what he perceives as his loyalty to a trusted servant of the king. So he lays down a condition for the hallowed bread. The young men must have kept themselves from women, basically ensuring a state of ritual purity. David doesn't miss a beat. He quickly assures him they've been kept away for 3 days, claiming their vessels are holy. Satisfied with that assurance, Ahimelech makes his choice. He crosses a massive boundary and hands the starving fugitive the consecrated shewbread.
But David needs way more than just a meal. He needs a way to defend himself. He asks if there's a spear or sword around, keeping up his lie by saying the king's business required haste. Ahimelech, who is completely taken in by David's cover story at this point, offers him something truly legendary. He reveals that the sword of Goliath the Philistine, yes, the very sword of the giant David famously slew, is kept right there, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. David eagerly accepts it, saying, There is none like that, give it to me. Ahimelech's trust in David is absolute, and tragically misplaced, considering the massive danger David is bringing right to his doorstep.
Section 3. The Shadow of Doeg. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is David and Ahimelech are actually not alone in this sanctuary. There is a silent, lurking threat right in the room with them.
Listen to how the source text describes this. It says, A certain man was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdsmen that belonged to Saul. Notice the intense juxtaposition here. He is occupying a sacred setting, supposedly detained for some religious purpose, and yet, listen to his earthly title, the chiefest of the herdsmen. It screams political power and direct allegiance to the very king who is hunting David.
Which raises the absolute most suspenseful question of this entire encounter. Who is he really loyal to in this room? Imagine the incredible tension. A known, high-ranking loyalist to King Saul is standing silently in the shadows, just watching the priest of Nob feed David consecrated bread and arm him with the sword of Goliath. Doeg doesn't speak a single word in this text, but his mere presence acts as a ticking time bomb.
Section 4. A contrast in loyalties. Let's look closely at these two secondary characters, because their differing allegiances shape the entire narrative. And this brilliantly illustrates the core thematic divide of our explainer. Think about Ahimelech. He's a man driven by sacred duty. He's concerned with holiness and ritual purity, but ultimately his loyalty is to the kingdom and what he believes to be the legitimate needs of the king's servant. He takes this incredible risk to provide the bread and the sword out of compassion and perceived duty. Then think about Doeg. Even though he's in a holy place, his identity is entirely tethered to earthly political power as Saul's chief servant. His loyalty definitely isn't to the sanctuary, and there's no way it's to David. His loyalty is a pure, unadulterated political allegiance to King Saul. Ahimelech acts out of a sacred trust. Doeg just watches, gathering intelligence for the crown.
Section 5, Madness and Survival.
Because the presence of Saul's chief herdsman instantly shatters whatever temporary safety David found at Nob, he has to move. Fast. He knows Doeg will report what he's seen. Consider the timeline here. David arrives at Nob desperate and alone. He secures the consecrated bread. He claims Goliath's mighty sword. And then he bolts. The crucible has become a trap, forcing him to frantically flee from the holy sanctuary of Israel and run directly into enemy territory, seeking refuge with Achish, the king of Gath.
Talk about jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? Gath is a Philistine city, and almost immediately the servants of King Achish recognize him. They don't just see a random fugitive, they see the famous warrior of Israel. They literally quote the pop culture of the day asking, did they not sing, Saul have slain his thousands and David his 10,000s? And remember, he's carrying Goliath's sword. That definitely didn't help his cover. The danger he faces right here is absolute.
The text tells us David took these words to heart and was sore afraid. So, what does a desperate person do when their life is literally on the line? They adapt. And David takes some extreme, humiliating steps to survive. First, he completely changes his behavior. Second, he feigns madness in their hands. Third, he scrabbles or scratches at the doors of the gate. And fourth, he actually lets his spittle fall down upon his beard. I mean, it is a stunning degradation for a mighty warrior, but make no mistake, it is a highly calculated act of pure survival.
And honestly, incredibly, this sheer desperation works. King Achish looks at this degrading display and is just completely disgusted. He dismisses David, berating his own servants, saying, "Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then have ye brought him to me? Have I need of mad men?" By sacrificing his dignity and executing this massive, humiliating deception, David successfully manipulates the king and secures his escape. So we've just watched 3 men navigate a real crucible of danger. David lied to a priest and faked madness to an enemy king just to stay alive. Ahimelech bent sacred laws out of compassion in what he believed was loyalty to the state. And Doeg the Edomite stood silently in a holy place, his strict political loyalty to a paranoid king overriding literally everything else. So I leave you with this final thought. When survival is truly on the line and the pressure is at its absolute highest, how do our deepest loyalties actually shape our actions? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.